Do you guys want to live forever? I want to live forever. Baby Yoda wants to live forever. Who wouldn't want to live forever? We're gonna go find out if it's possible. Nellie Bean wants to live forever. You got gunk in your eye. It's a tough life. You guys, I have done a lot of sci-fi in my life. A lot of sci-fi. I have been in cryosleep multiple times. Only once. Only one time. Only one time have I played a character that went into cryosleep and came out. But I didn't realize that it was an actual thing. I mean, who wouldn't want to be frozen, go to sleep, get put on Elon Musk's spaceship, go to Mars, wake up, and all of a sudden you're in total recall? Who wouldn't want to do that? I would. I would like to be in a movie with Schwarzenegger, but in real life, who wouldn't want to do that? That's not Total Recall. What movie is that?
Yeah,
it's Total Recall with the lady with the 3 boobs. Yeah, I remember. Okay, quite a few celebrities have shown interest in cryonics. Britney Spears, Simon Cowell, Seth MacFarlane, Larry King.
When I go, I want to be frozen.
And we're gonna find out the truth about Walt Disney. Frozen? Not frozen. We're off to talk to Max Moore at Alcor Cryonics. They are the leader in freezing people. This is Max. I'm gonna go decide if I wanna freeze myself.
We all know about cryosleep. It's been so dramatized.
It's in the movies and TV shows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality of it and how far advanced it is I think the thing that's so shocking to people and myself. So the fact that you're even here sort of blew my mind.
Right, this is actually real? People do this? Yes.
Yes. And so now I want everyone else is going to be as mind blown as I am. So
Okay. Well, let's start off by looking at a bit of history.
Please.
And then we'll show you basically the main parts of the process.
Yes.
So we have this infographic to give us a kind of sense of perspective of how did this idea get started. And we can go all the way back to 1773. We like to think of Ben Franklin, who's an amazing mind, a polymath, as the guy, kind of the godfather of cryonics. He, obviously in the early days of America, was wondering, how is this country going to work out in a couple of hundred years? Wouldn't it be great if I could come back and see it? And of course he knew he couldn't really do that, but he kind of speculated, what if I was to be pickled in a vat of Madeira with my best friends and come back into the warmth of America in the future? So he had the right idea, he didn't have the technology. And then 1962, Robert Ettinger brought out a book, the unfortunate title of The Prospect of Immortality. I say unfortunate because we're not offering immortality, we're offering a chance of longer life. Not quite the same thing.
Robert Ettinger has been cryopreserved like the bodies of his first and second wives and his mother. That's gonna be real awkward when they all wake up. I wonder if he's gonna like wake them all up at the same time, or if he's gonna like wake them up in order.
Like first wife, second wife.
Like if he's like, I should have married this one first. Do over.
The very first guy to be cryopreserved, Dr. James Bedford, 1967. And then our organization was founded in 1972, so we've been around for quite a while.
So somebody was actually cryopreserved in 1967, which is so interesting to me because the jump between Benjamin Franklin in 1773 to the first book that actually talked about the likelihood of it in 1962 is vast. But then 1962 to 1967 is only 5 years.
Yeah, because people read the book and a bunch of different people tried to start up organizations, and of course they didn't do it very well back then. He was not very well cryopreserved compared to what we do today, but they did their best they could. So yeah, in just a few years a whole bunch of groups started up. That was our first cryopreservation. That was Fred Chamberlain's father of our co-founder, but we inherited James Bedford later on, so we actually have the earliest cryonaut still with us.
Which is amazing to me, that the body is actually still cryopreserved.
I actually saw him in California when we cut him out of the sealed container in 1991. You could actually see the original ice cubes were still intact, and he looked great for someone who'd been legally dead for decades.
Like literally a time capsule. That is amazing to me.
So his relatives actually maintained him, which is pretty unique back then.
Yeah, so when did you come into Alcor?
Well, I joined in actually this year, 1986, the same year as Eric Drexler's book came out, which is about nanotechnology. Now everybody hears about nanotechnology, but it was a new thing back then. A lot of people read that book as he talked about cryonics and they went, oh, I can see how that might work. We can get these tiny little machines that go inside cells and repair them. So that actually led to a kind of a big growth in membership at the time.
My character in Bionic Woman had nanobites, and she was in a very bad car accident, and they used nanotechnology to improve her body and bring her back. The likelihood of that, I mean, is that still
No,
science
really.
fiction?
We have the technology. We can rebuild you.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Actually, just in this last year, the Nobel Prize in Physics went to 3 physicists who designed basic nanomachines. And we're still a long way from the kind of thing Drexel's talking about. But yeah, he got a Nobel Prize for early nanomachines.
Amazing.
And if you think about it, our cells are full of nanomachines. They just evolve naturally to do all kinds of interesting tasks.
Right, they're organic.
Yeah. And if people think, it's impossible you could repair someone's damaged cells. Well, think about how you got here. You started off as a single fertilized cell, and it grew into all of this stuff. It sounds like magic, right?
It is like magic. If you see
you know how it's done.
a baby, like an embryo, put into a stomach and actually see the progression of that, it is just absolutely amazing what our bodies can do.
That's another point I like to make, because people kind of don't make the connection unless they say it. If you think about it, we actually have people walking around, millions of them, who were cryopreserved. They were just embryos at the time. Right? So they're actually in liquid nitrogen vapor, they were implanted and they grew. Now we can't do that with whole organisms, but with simple cells we can do that.
It is interesting that you think about it. I have eggs frozen right now, and that was such a disconnect for me until you just said that absolutely, they're cryopreserved.
Yeah,
I mean, of course they are.
Potential kids.
Yeah. What made you, when you came on in 1986, what is your through line that brought you to Alcor?
I know, pretty weird, right, for a 22-year-old to sign up for something
I was
like
going to
this.
say, yeah.
Well, I was always kind of a weird guy. I was always interested in the future. I watched the Apollo 11 moon landing when I was 5 years old, and everyone after that, when everybody else got bored of them. I've always been interested in space, in increasing human intelligence, in life extension since I was like 15. So I've always been kind of a futurist, and I was interested in life extension, and then met some people who were meeting in London once a week at Bargenholm College, talk about all this stuff that I couldn't talk about with any of my friends who thought it was weird, and they were actually getting Our magazine, we still do today, at that time, and they kind of shoved it at me. What do you think of this? And I kind of, makes sense to me. And then when I became a member, I got a challenge from the president of Alcor at the time to say, why don't you become the first person in England to sign up? And then, okay, why not start an organization? Okay, so I just...
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so from here we can go see the first stage. There's kind of 3 core steps in the process. It's actually fairly complicated, but we'll simplify it down to the main points.
The only thing I've seen so far that makes sense to me is the bathroom. That I know how it works.
What about the 3D printer? No?
The 3D printer I sort of understand.
Okay, so let's assume that I've signed up with Alcor and I'm on my deathbed for whatever reason. I'm gonna assume that I'm 98, smoking a cigarette and drinking like a whiskey, and I'm on my deathbed.
Wait, you're gonna take up smoking?
I am.
Again?
Yeah, I mean, if I make it to 95, yes, I'm going to take up smoking. I might also start snorting cocaine, just because. If I've made it that long, you might as well. So I'm on my deathbed, with some rails, cigarette, and whiskey. What happens next?
So this is a very patient member of staff and never complains, this is just a dummy, but this helps people to visualize what we do. So people make arrangements for this well ahead of time, hopefully. They don't leave it to the last minute because that's problematic. If we have some advance warning, which we hope is the case because it's much better than rushing at the last second, we will actually station a team by the bedside. So we have to wait legally until the patient's declared legally dead, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. People go, oh, well, they're dead, so what's the point? Well, if you think about it, people who are legally dead donate organs all the time, which are living. Like, almost everything is still alive.
Yes.
It's just something critical has failed. And if in 1960 your heart stopped beating, they just say you're dead, and that was it. Now we do defibrillation and CPR. So death is not this line. It's kind of a gradual spectrum.
It's something that I never had really even thought about until Max said it. We already are doing things bringing people back from the dead right now. We do CPR, we do defibrillation, we do these things already to extend a person's life and bring them back. Cryonics is just another version of that, and I didn't realize that.
So our goal is to intervene as soon as possible. After legal death, we will move the patient from the bed to the ice bath. We're going to cover them with ice and add water and then circulate the icy water around the patient. If you just dump ice on them, they don't cool as fast. So we're going to do that. We're going to use mechanical CPR because we have to inject a whole bunch of different medications to protect the cells, and you have to have circulation to do that, otherwise they won't reach the rest of the body. We use a ventilator and a cooling mask, so we get cold water directly to the head to cool the brain, being the most important part. So this all happens pretty fast. At this point, we do not want to go below freezing.
Okay.
Because we don't want to form ice crystals. That's very damaging to the cells. So here we just want to cool towards freezing, especially the first 20 degrees C is really important because when you're still body temperature, things are going to fall apart really rapidly. The more cold you are, the slower things run. In fact, if you go for brain surgery these days, they will chill you down. They'll take out your blood, put it with a saline solution, much like we do in a way, and they'll actually cool you down like 10 degrees. And there's actually studies out now where they're taking gunshot wound victims and cooling them down from 38 to 10 degrees C, and that gives you basically 4 times as long to operate.
Because it slows the blood down.
Yeah, it slows everything down, all the cellular activity.
So this is exactly why when we hear about it from time to time, a person falling into a frozen lake or something, clinically dead, and far more than the brain can last without oxygen, and they're able to be brought back and actually suffer no long-term brain effects.
Exactly. I think the record holder is Anna Bargenholm from Sweden, who's clinically dead for somewhere like 45 minutes to an hour and a half. We're not sure exactly, but a long time.
A long time.
And pretty much fully recovered.
You guys, you have to go read up on Anna Bargenholm. This woman survived for 80 minutes in freezing cold water.
She survived for 40.
40 of the minutes she was alive, and for 40 more minutes she was legally dead in the water, and she's alive. Like, this woman is 10 years older than me. Not that that matters, but I'm just, my mind is blown by this story. You have to go look at it. Anna Bargenholm. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, this old idea that the brain will die after 3 minutes without oxygen is not quite true. It really depends if you cool down and they carefully rewarm, you're doing the right kind of thing. The problem is actually what they call reperfusion injury. When you restart circulation, all kinds of nasty chemicals start happening, but you can protect against that. So there isn't, a hard limit like that. After an hour, clinical death, some people have returned. It's not that uncommon these days, especially children, because they cool faster than adults in general.
Is that because they're smaller?
They've got a larger surface area to volume ratio. So I think the bigger person's got more on the inside and less on the outside comparatively. So
right.
Kind of a physics thing.
Yeah, physics wasn't really my thing, or biology. Math of any kind. Really didn't like science. I did really great in PE.
So this happens pretty fast. The first part of the cooling, basically, we've done cases in a local hospice here in Scottsdale where from the point of declaration of legal death to transferring the patient, putting this on and the ice and like 12 different medications, driving them back here about 35 minutes.
Wow, that's a quick turnaround.
So we do cases locally, across the country, Canada, England, Europe, even Thailand and China. So
wow.
They're all kind of different situations. So this part, people in hospitals kind of understand this because it's not very different than people who are donating organs. Basically, you're trying to maintain tissue viability and moving very fast to get it to the recipient.
Absolutely.
In this case, the recipient is yourself.
Yeah.
You're donating your organs to yourself in the future, in a sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So from here, the next stage really is to go to the operating room to see what we do next, which is our preparation for the supercooling. Okay, so let's go to the OR. We'll have to put on the booties to go in. So this is our operating room. It's pretty much like a regular hospital operating room with a few differences. The patient that you saw in the ice bath will come in through the back door here, and when we put them on a special operating table, it's actually designed to shape the patient so that when they get really cold, they won't freeze with their arms sticking out, which will make it difficult to store them.
If I get frozen, I want to get frozen like this. Like Han Solo. Slightly confused, slightly pensive, really in shock.
You can also put a cover over the top when we're finished with the surgery and pump liquid nitrogen vapor in to begin the cooling. But what usually happens is that we don't have any full-time surgeons because we don't have enough cases, but we'll call in one of our contract surgeons and they'll come in and essentially do a median stenotomy, opening up the chest, access the major blood vessels of the heart, and then connect the vascular system to our pump and chiller system here. And the goal here really is to remove as much water and other fluids like intracellular fluids from the body as we can, because if you leave those in there and go below freezing, they're going to crystallize.
Right, okay.
And that's bad because they don't blow up, contrary to what a lot of people think, but they will form crystals outside and between the cells and poke holes in the membranes. Yeah. And that's going to be a lot of repair work in the future.
Yeah. Just
as with cryopreserving embryos and other things, we try to cryoprotect them. We use what we call a cryoprotectant, which is basically medical grade antifreeze.
So they remove all of the blood and the liquid out of your body and they pump it full of antifreeze. Sort of.
Now, some patients preserve just the brain.
Right.
Actually, about half our members are signed up for that, including myself. So in that case, it kind of varies on the situation, but typically we'll start here and then we'll do a neuroseparation, a few vertebrae down, and then take the cephalon, as we call it, which is basically the skull plus the brain, and we'll put that over here into the neuro ring. So you'd be upside down in here, and instead of going in through the heart, we'll use the carotid vessels. But otherwise, it's basically the same procedure. We'll circulate through the system here, chilling the fluid, replacing the blood with the cryoprotectant. Now you might say, why on earth would you just want to reserve the brain? Isn't that like, in Futurama, where they're all flying around on these flying plates?
I'm Leonard Nimoy. Spock?
The logic of that is, as I see it, if you think of the kind of technology you'll need to repair a damaged brain, 100 billion neurons, reverse the aging process, and so on, all of that technology to grow a new body is going to be easy by comparison. We're already starting to do it. We're already growing organs. I mean, it's not science fiction anymore to say within maybe a decade we'll be growing human organs in the lab. We can already grow organoids, kind of simple organs, out of stem cells, which is pretty amazing. And if you think about it, many animals can regenerate limbs and fingers. We're just really lousy at that.
Yeah.
When we're embryos, we can still do it a bit, and we can still still do like, live as a little bit, but we're just very bad at it. But tinker with those genes, change the signals. Why would I take my old 95-year-old body along if you're going to have to completely redo the thing anyway?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, when you put it that way, that this becomes a much more realistic like solution for a lot of people, or idea for a lot of people, especially if the thing that took your life is another part of the body that has failed you.
Yeah, it's probably easier to regrow it rather than repair that whole thing, which is a huge number of cells to repair.
Right.
And another thing to express is that a lot of people say, well, why would I do that? I'll come back as an old person. Well, no. Why would you bother bringing you back as an old person if you're going to just conk out again? No, the whole idea is we have the kind of technology at that point that we can reverse the aging process.
You're signed up for this. Is there a part of you that is maybe less scared or less worried of an impending death because you know that you have the solution and the technology is not that far away? And does it help you live a more full life with a little less things holding you back, maybe?
Not really. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference because I don't know what my chances are. I don't know. First of all, we don't know for sure this is going to work, and we make that very clear to people signing up that we don't guarantee this. It depends on a lot of unknowns. Plus, what if I die in a car accident and I get autopsied, or die when I'm in the middle of the woods? Or there's all kinds of things, or I have a massive brain aneurysm. So it's not a guarantee of any kind. So it's really a backup plan, but it doesn't really make me any less. I don't leave my seatbelt off and that kind of thing. No.
Interesting. Okay.
It probably would make some difference in that whereas if I didn't do this, I probably would go hiking in wildernesses. But now I might think twice about that. And so I've got a really good GPS tracker, and everybody knows where I am.
Yeah, for sure.
See, this is really interesting to me because I thought that cryo-freezing you would give you the confidence and ability to just live life fuller and go do crazy things and live life on the edge. And it's kind of the opposite of that.
Because we actually had a case where someone had a helicopter crash in northern Alaska and he could not be retrieved. There's just no way. So
of course.
There are a few things like that make a difference.
Yeah. Interesting.
Is the brain storage cheaper than the full body storage?
Yes, and that's one also advantage of it is that the whole process for a whole body is $200,000, which might sound like a lot, but most people pay with life insurance, which makes it quite affordable.
When your spouse dies and all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I'm sorry. He spent that money freezing himself. It is his money.
If you're brain only, it's 80,000. And one reason is you can store 10 neuro patients in the same space as one whole body patient.
Right.
And if you're thinking about, we have to keep this up for decades, maybe a century, that adds up quite a bit.
Right.
And there may be some advantages to neuro. That's kind of, we argue about which one is better. But if you don't have to worry about optimizing for the rest of the body, you can focus on the brain, which to me is the only part that really matters because the rest is replaceable.
Do you see a commonality between the 100, and you said you have 176? Got it backwards. 176 patients in there in either neuro or full body states. Is there a commonality between these people that you've seen?
In a very general sense, yeah. We have people of all different walks of life, but I think there are 2 or 3 qualities they have in common. First of all, it's pretty clear that they're a high level of education. They tend to have degrees or advanced degrees. They tend to be pretty smart, which obviously helps them to understand the process and how it works. But I think even more important, I think they have a sense of adventure. I've talked to lots of people about cryonics, obviously, and many people, even if they say, well, yeah, I think that could work, but I wouldn't want to do that. I'd appear in a future where I'm obsolete, and what would I do for a living, and it's all scary, and the robots will be hunting me down, or I'll be living in a wasteland. I don't have a lot of patience for that. So I think that's highly unlikely to begin with. We've watched too much science fiction. Sorry, but yeah. A lot of
Keep watching too much science fiction.
But it's dystopic for the most part, right?
Yes, of course.
And the actual progress of human history has been upwards. You think of any time in the past you'd rather live, really? When women didn't get the vote, when we had slaves, when 3/4 of the children died in the first few years. We romanticize the past. It was a terrible place, and things tend to get better. So my view is any world I'll come back into is probably one even if I have to start from nothing, I want to do that. So it does take some sense of adventure. There are ways of actually not starting from nothing we could talk about. And part of our mission, by the way, is to rehabilitate people. We're not just going to wake you up and push you out the door and say, good luck out there, like you would with a coma patient coming out.
You would have to.
Yeah. And for a long time, when we did this process, we didn't know how well we'd done the job. There's no way we could tell how well we cryoprotected the brain. Now we actually can do CT scans, and we have our own CT scanner, thanks to a big research donation. This one is actually Fred Chamberlain, our co-founder. His brain looks fantastic. There's no ice showing in there except in the ventricle, which is an open space. The brain has shrunk as it should. Actually, it dehydrates. This one is not so good. You can see only partial protection of the brain. So there's some ice formation, but this one looks great. So Fred, fortunately, who actually came here from Florida, we were there at his bedside. bedside. We started immediately. He got a very good cryoprotection.
Can you pinpoint what went wrong or what didn't work with the second?
Sometimes, actually, we're doing a big research program right now where we're going through all the CT scans, all the records, what were the circumstances. We know that one big factor is going to be what delay was there. In Fred's case, there was no delay whatsoever because we were right by the bedside. It was planned. In the other case, I'm not sure what the details were, but we may have had to fly to another state. He may have had, other medical problems, maybe problems with his vascular system, so there was bad blood flow. It really does vary a lot.
Is that the outline of the actual brain?
Yeah,
you can see
that's
it.
the eyeballs, that's the brain, which is, again, dehydrated.
Yeah, huh.
Yeah, Fred planned that out. He was in Florida. He was dying of prostate cancer, and we managed to get it on a flight with some assistance. Took him to a hospice, and because there's no death with dignity law here, the only thing you can do legally is refuse food and water. So he told them, "I'm telling you, do not give me any fluids or any food." They loaded him on morphine, otherwise it would have been miserable.
Of course.
And it was amazing. I think it took 10 days.
My grandmother.
It was unbelievable how long that took.
They did the same thing. It was 11 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought 3 days with no water and that was it, even if you're healthy, but no.
It's a long time. You were saying that the people whose brains are cryopreserved are not considered by law humans anymore.
We don't know in the future, will you come back as legally the same person or will you have to adopt a new identity? That's actually a live issue that we've talked to our trust experts on, because we're trying to create trusts that will take your money with you.
Yeah.
And that's a question. Should you have the same social security number? It's like, there is some legal precedent. People who are presumed dead are declared dead and social security is cancelled and they reappeared.
Right.
So are you the same person or not? So there is a law that lets you reestablish your identity, but this would certainly actually argued it'd be better legally if you had a new legal identity. Otherwise the insurance company might want their money back or other issues. So we have an agreement with the patient while they're alive, the member, that this is what we're going to do with you, and so obviously we have an obligation absolutely to preserve and to bring them back if we can, but there's no law that would prosecute us for homicide because they're not considered to be people.
Right.
We consider them to be people and potentially alive again, but not in the eyes of the law.
Right.
So we're certainly banned by contract law, but not by kind of medical law once they're legally dead.
Right, because that's interesting. So your contract is with the patient, not the family.
Right.
So you're legally obligated to the patient, not the family, in the sense that was one of my questions. What happens if the patient outlives the family and there's no one to wake them up?
We're going to do that. That's part of our mission. Yeah, I mean, we have, like you met Linda Chamberlain, our co-founder. She has several relatives who are cryopreserved, so she has an interest in bringing them back. Her son is signed up. She has an interest in bringing her back. So it's kind of a chain of interests there, and I know plenty of people in there. So it's part of our mission. Our job is, we're doing this for ourselves. It's not a business. So we don't rely on families or society to bring people back. That's going to be something we do.
And is the timing of bringing them back and everything stipulated in the contract, or is it just up to you guys to make that decision?
Because patients are not legally considered persons, you can't enforce any kind of clause like that. However, we will in good faith say, you put in your agreement your wishes and we'll do our best to respect that. So we can't guarantee a date that you'll come back, but you can say, for instance, my wife and I want to be brought back at the same time, if at all possible. Maybe it might not be possible, or I don't want to come back to my father. What if the wife calls you
and says, I don't want to be brought back at the same time, wake me up 100 years later? Because
I need a break.
Stay married
I need
for
some
50
time apart.
years, and then they'll be like, maybe wake me up a little later.
Give me a break of 75 years or so.
I know, something.
Yeah. Or you want to come back when your children back, or, So people actually do that quite often.
It's interesting because I came into this situation thinking I would never in a million years consider this. Maybe it's because I didn't understand it. And now, sitting here talking to you, it's preserving the brain is such an interesting thing, because could you imagine if you woke up in the future and your brain was brought back and you had a body and you were like, oh my God, I get to do this again?
Yeah. Well, not this, you do something different, right?
Max, I'm getting inspired here.
A lot of people don't want to come back because they don't have much imagination. They think, well, what would I do? There's so much to do.
There's so much
I haven't done yet, and I'm not going to get to do in my normal lifespan.
I say this to him all the time. I'm running out of time to do all the things I want to do. It's constant. I want to keep going and do things.
I want to be a mathematician, I want to be an actor, I want to be a pianist.
Yeah, I don't know, but I just want to see everything.
Yeah, there's lots of countries I haven't been. There's all the space to explore and to colonize, new civilizations to try and build. I mean, we've got to go somewhere off this planet and do something interesting. Actually, this is, you might see Mike Perry around. He's been working since the 80s, our patient caretaker. That's his cat, cryopreserved.
Aww.
And this is Jerry Leaf, who's one of the, he was a surgery researcher at UCLA, and he really developed a lot of our early capabilities. We don't do any animal experiments for a long time, but back then they did, in the 80s, experiments where they wash out the blood of the dog, replace it with a saline solution, chill them to just above freezing, hold them there for several hours, replace the blood, warm them up, and they were fine. Which is actually still world-leading research. Even the current human researchers haven't gone that far. So.
Well, because I was going to ask, nobody to this point has actually been brought back. Have you warmed any brains up to see if there's
Well, some people have. We wouldn't do that because we know we can't restore them right now. It's just not feasible with today's technology.
Right.
You have to rewarm fast enough to avoid recrystallization, which might sound paradoxical, but crystals form as you warm up. Now, it's not a problem with corneas and sperm and eggs and heart valves because they're small enough. There was a Japanese researcher, Suda, who actually took monkey brains and cryopreserved them and then warmed them up and actually found some fairly coherent electrical activity. But I doubt there was any really good fine level activity.
Right.
So we wouldn't want to do that today.
Right, of course.
It's, the first part we can do, and people don't quite get that, what we have to do now is preserve you under good conditions. We don't have to be able to bring you back today.
Yeah.
We just have to think, well, technology is going to keep advancing. What we're proposing doesn't violate any laws of physics. It's just a matter of time. And this buys you as much time as you want.
Yeah.
You can stay at that temperature for centuries and you'll be just as fresh as you started.
You don't have to know how it's going to end.
No.
You just have to know how to get it to the place where someone else can figure that out, or technology can.
It'd be like asking someone in, say, 1890, how are you going to get to the moon? And they go, I don't know, I haven't got a clue. But it can probably happen because it doesn't violate laws of physics. But even in 1960, we had really no clue, and then we had this huge program, and 9 years later, we were on the moon. We had to design rockets, life support vehicles, computers. So you can't really, in detail, say what you need for that.
So you bring up the 1800s. I hear that you've got two people here who were actually alive in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a picture of one right over here. Born in 1893, Dr. James Bedford, he was an occupational psychologist at the University of California. He was cryopreserved in 1967. Very uniquely, he was actually maintained by relatives for several years until we took him over. So we basically still have him as the very first cryonaut. And then in 1991, when we were still in California, we took him out of this extremely inefficient storage vessel. That's when I could actually see the ice cubes that originally used were still intact, which meant he'd never actually warmed up. And then we transferred him to one of our modern vessels.
Is that a good sign that he never actually warmed up and there were still ice cubes in there?
If he warmed up, he would just be a disaster.
Of course.
Yeah, because he.
How did the family keep him cryopreserved?
I'm not sure which organization. I think there was an organization that made these vessels, and they would just, they just paid them to maintain it and to refill it with liquid nitrogen. It was a very different design than what we use now, but probably very expensive one. But yeah, this is unusual because almost nobody from the 60s survived because they relied on people making payments constantly. And after a while, people say, well, Uncle Joe's been gone a few years now. I could spend this money on something else. That's why we do not.
That BMW's looking real nice.
Exactly. So we don't allow that. People have to pay up front with either life insurance, which is the most common, or a trust fund or something like that.
So when you say pay up front, how have you calculated how much money it's going to take to actually keep the brain or the body cryopreserved long enough for the advancements?
Well, the thing is, we don't try and guess how long it's going to take. We have to assume that it'll be indefinite. So it could be 100 years, it could be more. So basically, we have a patient care trust fund that's designed to never run out of money. So we have a rule, you can never take more than 2% a year. It's invested in a mix of growth versus very stable investments. And so if the market dives, it doesn't dive so much. If the market goes up, it still enjoys that gain. And over time, it should actually grow. And in fact, even if you get a fairly modest return, like 3% a year, you're going to double the money every 25 years. After 100 years, you've got 2, 4, 8, 16 times what you started with in real money, which should help to pay for repairs.
Yeah.
So that's really the rule. We can never sell more than 2% of the investments. And so far, we haven't sold any. And we calculate the amount we need by looking at what is the cost of storage and then what fraction of that investment will pay for that, basically. So it's a very conservative approach. We're the only organization that really kind of protects the patients that way because they can't help themselves, so it's up to us to do that.
I'm so curious because I know around this corner is where people are actually cryopreserved, so I can't wait to see that.
Let's go see.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the visitors area, which lets you see the whole patient care area.
So this is all 176?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A bit more than half are neuro patients, which is why they fit into these. So this whole area is secure. We've got metal plates in the walls in case somebody tries to drive a truck in here or something nuts. And this is banker's glass. Let me grab the little 3D printed model so I can show you what's in those things. So these vessels are called dewars, after Sir James Dewar in Scotland who invented them. They're basically very large, expensive thermos flasks. Right, so there's a vacuum layer around here, so that's where you can touch the outside. It's just chilly, but inside is incredibly cold. And this is just a polystyrene cork that floats on top. It's not sealed. If you sealed it, the liquid nitrogen, as it warmed, would expand and basically blow it up.
Those lids are just sitting right on top.
That's right, yeah. Whereas the one that James Bedford was in, it was sealed, but it had a pressure relief valve, so you have to let the pressure out one way or another. So
like a turkey with the little pin with the button.
Yeah, except we don't need to do a temperature probe inside. No. So when we finish in the operating room, we wrap the patient in a sleeping bag, basically, so in case we have to transfer them, we can soak the bag with liquid nitrogen and keep them cold. And then we put them in one of these aluminum pods for mechanical protection. And then we open up our roof hatch and we'll lift them up, put them in the dewar with 3 of their best friends for the next few decades.
And these are the brains. So the brains actually.
Yeah, so that goes in the center. We get 4 whole body patients and 5 neuro patients.
Wow.
Or we can convert this into room for 10 neuro patients.
So you're really utilizing the space well.
Yeah, so we can go in there and take a look.
Oh, wow.
If you're not too scared.
No,
It's funny.
this is just fascinating.
I have a friend at the park who's very macho, but he doesn't want to come and visit. He's scared for some reason. Like he thinks there's going to be people knocking on the doors. It's like, silly.
So what are the protections that this will continue to operate?
Well, okay, so yeah, I said there's no electricity needed. So you can touch the outside. It's just chilly because it's cool in here, it's metal. But inside, yeah, you don't want to put your hand on the inside. It's minus 320, extremely cold. We maintain the temperature not with electricity. This is not a mechanical freezer. We just top up with liquid nitrogen once a week. We have truck pulls up at the back there. We refill that bulk tank, the white one at the end, and then we fill all of these to top them up. We don't need to do it weekly, but that's just conservative. These will actually run for probably several months before the level gets low. So there's no power needed, except obviously for the alarm systems and for our comfort, the air conditioning in the summer.
Right.
No power is needed for these. So it's always funny when people say, you guys are so screwed if the power goes out. Like, oh, we never thought of that after 48 years.
Funny you should mention that. Yeah. Oh no, all these highly intelligent people around here, and we never thought about that.
So that's one of the 2 things people know about cryonics that's wrong, right? That if your power goes out, you're screwed. The other one is Walt Disney is frozen. He's not.
There you have it, guys. Walt Disney is not frozen.
So I've been telling people that I'm coming to do this. They say Walt Disney, and who's the other person?
Ted Williams.
Ted stepped into it and slammed it out of the park.
Ted Williams.
Yes,
Everyone
Ted Williams.
talks about Ted Williams
We
wanting
do have
to
Ted
have
Williams.
done it.
We do have Ted Williams.
You
yes.
do have Ted Williams.
Yeah, that's public knowledge. It was supposed to be private, but we had a big legal battle with the family.
Yes.
And so that's now public knowledge. We have Ted Williams. Walt Disney's buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery.
I thought Walt Disney was buried at Forest Lawn.
It was a mixture of news stories at the time. There was a cryonic story, and then he died, and it seems plausible, right? He built Tomorrowland and that kind of thing, but no, unfortunately not.
Yeah. Do you sign confidentiality agreements with all the people that are cryopreserved?
That actually is the choice of the members. So some people like myself are completely open about it, and I don't care what people think.
Of course.
Other people, especially if they're like doctors or lawyers or something, might want to be more private, and so they can be anonymous. In fact, as you walk around, you'll see pictures of patients. Some of them will have no name on them. Some of them won't be even a picture. So people can choose whether to be confidential or not. Some people choose to be confidential until they're cryopreserved and then open. Others just always confidential.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The only thing that scares me about this entire process is that I'm incredibly claustrophobic.
I'm a little claustrophobic too, but you won't even notice it. That's
I'll be dead.
You'll be unconscious. Yeah, you won't actually be dead if this works, but you won't be alive.
Because that is like my worst nightmare.
Oh, I know. I had to have CT scans done.
No, I hate it.
I hate it too.
It's like I don't even like a dark elevator. That scares me.
You don't have to worry about it. You won't even know. There'll be no brain activity whatsoever. You won't get bored. There'll be no lucid dreaming, not like in that movie.
Could you imagine? That's just what I need, is to be alone with my own thoughts for 100 years. I'd be running through old dialogue.
That's absolutely impossible because there'd be no metabolic activity, no brain activity. So you'll be like, you wake up like, was I just out? How long has it gone by? 100 years?
So I understand now the desires for people, and that they have this adventurous sort of outlook on life and things like that. Is that what motivates you daily to come to work and keep going? Is it just your fascination with it?
Well, yeah, for me it's, I don't want to die. I got so much more stuff to do. And 30 years ago, I was pretty optimistic that life extension science would have advanced further by now and that we'd be making more progress in stopping aging, but it's not going as fast as I'd like because it's not getting enough funding. I take various measures to try and slow down aging, which is just beginning to start happening. But I think it's pretty likely I'm going to need this. So that's my motivation, is I need to make this work as well as possible because I'm probably going to have to go through this for some time. Right, interesting. I've done, I've been through clinical trials to reverse the aging of my thymus gland, and I do a bunch of other stuff, but it may not be enough. And we need to put more research.
So why are your thymus gland? I don't even know what gland that is.
It produces your T cells, which are crucial to your immune system. It starts shrinking from like the age of 20 or something like that, and by the time you're 60, it's basically just a lump of useless fat, which is why old people have no immune system. They break a hip, get an infection, they die. But you can actually regenerate it with a certain process. It's been done, we did it in animals and AIDS patients, and I was one of the first clinical trials tried on adult males, and it seems to have worked. So
I was going to ask if they're trying it on AIDS patients, because that's the thing that we immediately associate with T cell destruction.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I went through a whole program. I had to go to Stanford Medical School and have my thymus scanned, and it looks like, it does regenerate.
So what are the benefits of having a thymus regenerate? Just that your immunity stays strong longer, so you live longer.
You won't get coronavirus. I might actually survive instead of being one of the people who die, and more likely not to die of flu when I'm older.
That's amazing. So in a typical year, how many patients do you have?
It varies a fair bit. In the last 9 years that I've been running things, we had as few as 3 and as many as 13. And curiously, actuarially, we expect, given the ages of our members, to have like 13 or 14 a year, but we don't get that many. And I think that's because on average, our members probably live longer, being more high educated, probably taking care of their health. So it's a little bit lower, but it'll grow over time.
Interesting. You know, what I thought this was and what it is are two completely different things. I had such a science fiction idea of this in my head. Like I'd walk in and, like smoke
The
comes
robot would
out,
say,
bodies
"Greetings,
pull
Katee."
out. I had this like idea in my head that,
But we can make it a bit more smoky now. We can get some,
No,
we can get some liquidation vapor. Actually, it's pretty good for the film.
drop
but-
some dry ice somewhere. You and your dad both work here.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, Jacob just started a couple of
Officially
weeks ago.
started
Yeah.
about a week ago, but I've been working here since 2012.
And you guys manufacture.
Pretty much everything. So all the stuff you see in there, the way the seats are mounted, the boxes on the side.
ice
We
baths.
literally make it all here in house.
Wow.
Jacob also analyzes our CT scan data.
Really? I was going to ask what your background is.
Yeah, so I have a master's degree in materials science, and I worked in a research lab on the ASU campus for about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I did part-time here, part-time there while I was doing my degree, but they really wanted to keep me around, so here I am. Yeah.
Now, are they going to keep you around indefinitely? Are you signed up?
But I do plan to, and if I do, it'll be neuro.
Yeah.
I do whole body, just because understanding what's required to sort of come back, knowing that the brain is the most important asset we have. So
Plus, you don't want to use all the space up.
yeah,
Yeah, that's more expensive.
Extra big pod.
Yeah. Is he a perfect example, not to talk about you like you're not here, a perfect example of you were talking about how one of the common things between your patients is that they're all of a higher level of intelligence. You're incredibly smart to me. So I would imagine that
not so smart.
a person that understands, that can wrap their brain around
That's
it because
pretty
they understand
standard.
the way that the brain works and they
Yeah.
understand that. Because to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, my heart, least important part of the thing, right? That's just the pump. Yeah.
Aristotle didn't think so. He thought that's where your soul was located. But yeah, it's just a pump. You don't even need a heart. Actually, some people have these little turbines, apparently, which I think is really cool. I'd love to have one of those because there's no heartbeat.
No heartbeat.
How cool would that be?
They're starting to grow them with 3D printers now.
Yeah.
Right?
Hearts.
You print the scaffolding and then just grow the cells in.
Yeah.
But we haven't yet gotten to that for the brain.
I have a heart condition, so it would be very interesting at some point if they're growing hearts. I'd be like, sign me up.
Oh yeah, that's not too far off, I think. But you can already print like parts of ears, right? Because that's just cartilage.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we've grown at least an organoid of some kind from stem cells, which is pretty amazing. So
And recently we've demonstrated that you can make adult cells into stem cells. So just the little bits of tissue that are left, the cephalon, which is the whole head and brain and everything, we can probably get enough information out of that in order to grow an identical copy of your body
Yeah.
in perfect health.
Yeah.
Correct, any degenerative problems or
So when you sign up,
Yeah.
not if, when you sign up, put in your instructions. If you bring me back and it hasn't already been done, fix my
Fix
heart.
my heart.
Yeah, like I
Well,
want to fix my eyes and my back. So
all of my frozen eggs can actually be used as stem cells for myself. It's one of the things that if for some reason
got all your genetic information.
yeah, isn't that cool? We've got all the pictures of the people all around that are cryopreserved, and the one that tore at my heartstrings the most is you've got a little girl in there.
Yeah. I think a previous youngest patient was a young woman, 23 years old, who's actually the subject of a really good New York Times story. But then by far our youngest patient, this little girl from Thailand, she wasn't quite 3 years old, had pediatric brain cancer. Both her parents were doctors. She had multiple brain surgeries, nothing worked. And so they contacted us and we were able to send a neurosurgeon and our team out there and actually do the procedure in Thailand and then bring her back on dry ice and then finish the cool down process.
Is she neuro or full?
She's neuro.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, our parents promised that they would sign up too, and we've kind of pushed them to that because obviously we want them to be there when she
course.
comes back. But the whole family was supportive. We had like 7 of them come visit here, so they're all
I'm
very
sure.
supportive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't have children, but I would imagine that losing your child is the hardest thing in the world. But if you had the ability to potentially do this, there maybe a tiny piece of, okay.
I think so, yeah.
You know?
Some comfort.
Yeah.
I know when Hal was cryopreserved, he was an old friend of mine. He's the first recipient of Bitcoin, famously. His wife is also a member, said she felt so much better that we were able to do this under good conditions that she had some hope that she'd choose him again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I know that if I died, he would get some relief out of that.
Thank goodness for that.
No, this was absolutely just This was amazing. I knew that this was going to be so interesting to talk to you and to get the tour, but to actually have an understanding of it now, a greater understanding, and to realize that for me now, it actually seems like something that's a real
sensible thing to do, maybe. Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Not crazy.
All of a sudden, it started seeming like, yeah, well, why aren't you cryopreserved?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got three options: get burned, eaten by worms and bacteria, get incinerated, or get nicely cryopreserved and have a chance.
Because that's literally what it is. It's just a third option, and it's the only one that has,
any chance of working. Yeah. Unless you believe you're going to an afterlife.
Unless you believe in afterlife.
But then how sure are you going upstairs rather than downstairs?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I'm going downstairs.
Where do I sign?
Oh, we got the sign up paperwork. It's in the information packet actually.
So I have the paperwork right here in my welcome folder that they gave me. And I don't know, on one hand, there is a part of me that is so incredibly intrigued and wants to see what the world looks like and wants to live again and do more things and see the world and all of those possibilities. But on the other hand, the negatives of it, I don't know. You don't know if it'll ever work. Maybe you don't live your life to the fullest because you're worried that you won't be near the facility if and when you do pass away. I don't know. I really don't know. So we started this episode wondering whether or not I should cryopreserve myself. And I still don't know. Is it an option? Absolutely. Is it as crazy as I thought it would be? No. Am I gonna do it? I haven't the foggiest idea. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Thank you everyone at Alcor. It was honestly the coolest episode. And I really appreciate you guys watching. So make sure you subscribe. Let me know what you think. Would you freeze yourself? What are your thoughts on it? So curious. And I will see you guys next episode. Bye.